Since the end of the Gulf War, it's been a tug-of-war with Saddam Hussein. America had warned him and threatened him, but for 3 weeks he kept UN weapons inspectors from going into a building where all the while Iraq might possibly have been developing its missiles program. Well, 10 years ago, Iraq was building a nuclear plant, which Israel was convinced could produce weapons-grade material. But instead of issuing warnings or threats, Israel secretly flew in and destroyed the reactor.
Until now, the details of how Israel's elite pilots carried out this high-risk mission have been kept secret. At the time, the world, even Washington, condemned their actions. But imagine the aftermath of the Gulf War if Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. Well, tonight, the daring Israeli Top Guns break their silence on how they carried out that mission. They'll take you and our Tom Jarrell into Israel's moment of crisis and on a riveting ride that some feared was a mission impossible.
Tel Aviv, January 1991. Iraqi missiles, the dreaded Scuds, rain down on Israel. They fall in densely populated neighborhoods. Though with conventional warheads, casualties are relatively light. But what if these missiles had been carrying nuclear warheads? Suppose, just suppose, this had been a nuclear attack.
Another Holocaust would have happened in the history of the Jewish people. Never again, never again.
Menachem Begin explaining his reason for launching a daring preemptive airstrike against Iraq 10 years before the Gulf War began. It was a decision fraught with peril, a pivotal moment of crisis in his country's fight for survival. The top-secret Israeli mission started here on a runway in the Sinai at 4:01 p.m., June 7th, 1981. You are looking through an onboard camera at the actual takeoff. 8 fragile F-16 fighter bombers, each burdened with 2 tons of explosives, raced down a runway for almost a mile to reach takeoff speed.
You can see the air-to-air missiles and the wingtips.
This pilot commanded what some would consider a near-suicidal effort. His name is Zev Raz, and he led his bomber squadron to the very heart of Iraq.
We knew it was quite responsible, very responsible mission, the most responsible mission of our life, and we were quite excited.
The target for these planes was the Osirak nuclear reactor under construction near Baghdad, a plant Israeli intelligence believed would soon be producing nuclear weapons. It was a difficult and dangerous assignment, with the fate of a nation in the balance. But this is not simply the story of a military mission. It's also a story about secret agents, sabotage, and a strategy for national survival. The seeds for this moment of crisis were sown here in Baghdad in 1974. The Premier of France, Jacques Chirac, makes 2 trips to sell nuclear technology to the man he calls a great statesman, then Vice President Saddam Hussein. The deal goes through. On the face of it, an agreement for a reactor to produce peaceful nuclear power for electricity. Electric power in oil-rich Iraq? Israeli intelligence didn't believe it.
We followed all this process for about 3 years.
General Yahushua Sagay, then head of Israeli military intelligence.
We also had done some sabotage work all over the world as well.
General Sagay is admitting here what his government denied then, that Israeli commandos blew up a French warehouse where reactor parts were awaiting shipment to Baghdad.
You succeeded in France to slow down the reactor with a sabotage raid
for about 8 months, 9 months, that was the whole...
It didn't stop it.
No.
As the intelligence poured in, the military made contingency plans to hit the reactor. The Israeli Air Force had just added a deadly new weapon system to its arsenal. The F-16 from General Dynamics was the most maneuverable jet fighter in the air. By the spring of 1981, there were over 50 of the new fighter bombers in Israel. By the books, this was strictly a mission impossible. The F-16s are not designed to fly more than 580 miles, but the mission was 600 miles long. To fly that far, the Israelis added extra wing tanks. Those plus the heavy bombs and additional weapons added so much weight the F-16s were technically too heavy to fly.
For us, I think it was quite a risky time.
David Ivry was commander of the Air Force.
Even taxiing with this kind of load is a kind of risk for the undercarriage itself. The same was on taking off on the runway.
For Israel, a nuclear deadline is ticking down to its moment of crisis. If an attack is mounted, it must come before the reactor goes into operation.
Then we will have a problem by bombing it or damaging it, that radiation might fall over Baghdad.
On a quiet Sunday afternoon, cabinet members were summoned here to the Prime Minister's residence on Balfour Street in Jerusalem. They arrived separately. Their chauffeured cars moved a few blocks away so as to not attract attention. Inside, in a room regularly swept for bugging devices, Menachem Begin shared the secret. The attack was underway. At the airfield in the Sinai, the pilots had spent a fitful night.
We went to sleep, nobody slept too much.
This pilot's identity is secret. He still flies for the Israeli Air Force. We'll call him Daniel.
You have always to talk about what is going inside your heart, your mind. Who has a better chances to stay? Who has better chances to come back?
It's almost takeoff time. These computer-generated graphics show the scene on the tarmac. Midway down the flight line, a crisis in plane number 5. The leader of the 2nd Squadron, a key player in this day's drama, has a total electronic failure in the cockpit of his special plane. We'll call him Moshe.
All my practice missions, all our training I did on that special airplane. And when it comes to D-Day, it collapsed.
The entire electrical system in the cockpit went down. The clock ticked toward takeoff as the pilot climbed down, ran for his backup plane, another F-16, fueled and ready. That plane worked perfectly. The mission is now a go, and the heavily loaded F-16s race down the runway toward their moment of crisis. Their route takes them across Saudi Arabia, hostile enemy territory. They hug the ground, flying through valleys and following the nap of the earth. These actual pictures from the F-16 show how they did it, evading enemy radar.
Lowest altitude was 100 feet above ground level, and maximum speed toward the target was almost 600 knots. We are now here in the western part of Saudi Arabia, northwestern part of Saudi Arabia.
This is where the pilots literally hold their breath for a critical procedure which could blow them out of the skies. The extra wing tanks are now empty. They have to be jettisoned for the mission to proceed.
We did something that the book says are forbidden, like jettisoning the drop tanks when they're empty in the presence of the bombs.
The tanks are located just a few inches from the 2,000-pound bombs also on the wings. Dropping the tanks under these flight conditions with live bombs so close has never been done before.
So when I had to push it, what I said, I closed my eyes and pushed it, and then it flew and everything was okay.
I can tell you that nobody was speaking for this time. It was, you could hear a fly in the command post.
Lighter and faster now, free of the wind drag from the jettisoned tanks, the fighters streak on.
Here we are passing from Saudi Arabia to Iraq. We can see some highway, some buildings. We saw some Bedouins here.
Were you flying low enough so you could see the faces of people looking up at you?
You can see the heads, not the faces, but you can see the heads.
It is too fast to see the faces. I mean, to see what the faces are looking like. But, of course, you see everything.
The good visibility saves their lives. An obstacle looms up that is not in the flight plan.
We had to fly very low, just, smoking on the ground. Then we saw the high-tension electricity wires, which was very high at that area, which forced us to fly above them. We jumped over that.
And Iraqi radar now starts to see the invading Israeli planes. They're less than 10 minutes from the target of this moment of crisis.
And they started fire from the moment we entered this area. Adrenaline is going higher when you start to see that they are shooting at you. You start to see these explosions, and you see the leader is flying through these explosions, and he's still flying.
The only thing that really bothers you as a leader is to find the target. We looked at the target on the left, and it was quite easy to identify. It's a huge target, very, very clear.
The Iraqis have fortified the reactor with huge earthen walls. Outside the perimeter are scores of anti-aircraft gun positions. SAM ground-to-air missile sites are also nearby, and 3 military air bases with interceptor squadrons are within 6 miles. Now in the air overhead, exploding shells from anti-aircraft artillery called by the pilots AAA, and below, the target.
I saw the walls. They were very high walls, and I saw the AAA that's coming like, you know, that's a pouring of lead and fire from that.
With the target in sight, the lead pilot takes his squadron skyward, going for attack altitude.
The air was clear and the visibility was fine, so there was no problem to identify the target after I pull up.
Put your nose down, aiming the target, and this is actually the most exciting and the most important moment of all of these rides. So in that moment, you see nothing but your gun sight and the target, your gun sight and the target, until they are becoming to be in one line of sight.
This is how it looks inside an attacking F-16 as this moment of crisis unfolds. On the actual heads-up display in the cockpit, the computer indicates the line of fall that the bomb must follow. When the pilot releases the bombs, this bar, the pickle bar, lights up.
You push the button, and you pray that bombs will go off.
This is the moment of truth. What you're about to see is one nation destroy another's nuclear capability for the first time in history.
I saw the dome collapsing. When I flew over, after I released my bomb, I had to make a little turn to look at that. And there was a lot of AAA, but I ignored it and looked down. And I saw the explosion of the bombs of the airplane before me, and my own.
The first thing is turn the aircraft, look back. What do you see here? What reason we have to go there if we don't see the results, you know?
So it went exactly as planned.
No question. Like a very nice concert with a very good orchestra and a very good leader.
It was a kind of a concert, no doubt about it. A good concert.
But the general cannot relax yet. His pilots are climbing for their lives. And there's no report yet from plane number 8, the last pilot in.
He, for some reason, did not answer on the radio. And we will start looking for him. I will start looking for a ball of fire or something. All of a sudden, he came over the radio. And, well, I felt like singing in the cockpit. I said, well, that was good there. Now we have to all the way back.
The return trip is high and fast, as documented in this Israeli Air Force recreation. There is no time or fuel for evasive tactics. An escort of F-15s moves in to cover the attack plane's flanks, but not a single enemy aircraft rises from the ground to challenge them. The F-16s almost point themselves toward home.
They have soul. Airplanes have soul. The airplane they were excellent.
The mission was 100%. So it is a very nice satisfaction. It was a very romantic moment. So just before sunset, when you fly and you see the sunset, it's very exciting to see the sunset, the colors, the red colors of the sky. Exciting. What can I say more than that?
There won't be another Holocaust. Never again. Never again.
Now we look at that as such a magnificent feat, but at the time, everyone condemned that act, including the United States.
The U.S. and the UN strongly condemned Israel, feeling the act may have provoked wider problems in the region, a wide-ranging war.
Boy, what would have happened if they hadn't done that? What do we know now that we didn't know then?
We know now that it was a very good idea that they carried out the attack. Think of the Gulf War, for example, and the implications for American forces. Think of Tel Aviv with Scuds falling. Had they had nuclear warheads, it would have been a catastrophe.
And think of these enormously brave men who came back alive, and even though in disguise, here they are.
They're remarkable, and 12 years later, they are still, most of them, skilled fighter pilots prepared to do the same thing.
And finally telling this story. I was fascinating to watch them and see it as they saw it. Thank you, Tom.